Making Pysanky is a uniquely Ukrainian art form. Many of the symbols found on Pysanky are based on pagan traditions that predate Christianity. Archaeological excavations in Ukraine have unearthed Pysanky that date back to the late Neolithic era, 5500 to 2750 BC. In Ukrainian, the word Pysanky is plural for Pysanka. In time, the making of Pysanky transitioned from a pagan tradition to a Christian one. Here are a few symbols used in making Pysanky that predate Christianity. After the year 988, many of the pagan symbols were redefined as Christian, while Christian-themed motifs began appearing also. The word Pysanka comes from the Ukrainian word to write. Instead of painting the egg, the colored patterns on the egg are created using a process similar to batik. A tool called a kistka transfers molted beeswax onto the egg white. The part of the egg that is covered in wax will remain white until the process of creating the Pysanka is complete. Once the white portion of the design is preserved, the egg is dipped in a dye that colors the exposed white portion of the egg. The kistka is then used to further the design in that particular color. The addition of the color must be done sequentially from lightest to darkest colors of dye, beginning with yellow to orange to red to black. One of the basic symbols used in designing a Pysanka is a line that encircles the entire egg. To some, the line represents the circle of life. To others, it represents the eternity of mankind. For Ukrainians, creating a Pysanka has a deep cultural and spiritual meaning. It would not be an exaggeration to claim that those who identify themselves as Ukrainian have created at least one Pysanka in their lifetime. The making of a Pysanka is so ingrained in Ukrainian self-identity that it is an annual ritual to make them at Easter time. This is a photo of my grandmother who was born in Canada in 1904. As a child, weeks prior to every Easter, I watched Baba make a Pysanka for every member of her family, brothers, sisters, her children and grandchildren, and many friends. She even mailed Pysanky packaged in popcorn to her brothers who lived as far away as California. Here is a photo of a Pysanka made for me by my neighbor, the Archbishop and Metropolitan of the Ukrainian Catholic Church of Canada, Maxim Hermanyuk. Despite his stature, he too found time to partake in this bloodline tradition. I created my first Pysanka when I was 6 years old. Although that was 45 years ago, I remember the day vividly as if it was yesterday. Here's the Pysanka I made. Unfortunately, it has seen better days. It was preserved in my grandmother's china cabinet for 15 years, after which she returned it to me. Following an unfortunate mishap, this is all that is left. All the king's horses and all the king's men could not put my Pysanka together again. I tried to bring it together using tissue paper and glue, but most of the pieces were too small to piece together. I could have thrown it away, but as I mentioned, the making of a Pysanka is both a traditional and spiritual undertaking. Before starting to make your Pysanka, you must wash and then rinse your hands well. Any oils or soap left on your hands will interfere with the dyeing process or leave permanent fingerprints interlaced with your design. To prepare the egg, place it in a bowl of warm water with a tablespoon of vinegar for 5 minutes. The acidic vinegar will ensure that the egg is clean by slightly etching the calcium carbonate of the shell. Pad dry the egg with a paper towel and allow to air dry for a few minutes before beginning. I use a candle to heat my kistka. The kistka consists of a metal funnel secured to a wooden handle. The word kistka means bone in Ukrainian. I've been told that the first kistki, plural for kistka, were made of bone. It could be true, but I don't really know. You must first heat the kistka in the flame of a candle so that it will be easy to fill the funnel without damaging the kistka. Scoop some wax into the funnel and heat the funnel to melt the wax. Careful not to overheat the kistka, as it may catch on fire. If heated too much, the wax will be too thin and may drip or run out of the kistka too quickly and spoil your design. Now use the kistka to apply wax onto your egg. Let the wax flow out of your kistka. Do not move your kistka back and forth in an attempt to draw on the egg, as this will spoil the continuous line. Move the egg rather than moving the kistka, as this helps produce a straight line. Move steadily until you've reached your starting point. Now you've created the circle of life, also considered the line of eternity. Everything covered with wax is now preserved in white. Now I'll subdivide the egg into segments in the same fashion. To keep the line straight and segments even, it is helpful to place drops of wax on the egg that can be used as reference points. Simply connect the dots. Be sure that the dots are smaller than the line so the dots disappear as you create the line. Remember to move the egg, not the kistka, to ensure straight lines. Now that the lines are done, let's begin the design. The main design will be a motif called a rosette. A diamond shape will be formed in each triangular segment, forming the petals of the rosette. The rosette is now complete. The egg is now placed into yellow dye for 3 to 5 minutes. The dye is specifically manufactured for making pysanky. Remove the egg from the dye and pat it dry using a paper towel. Now use the kistka to create the yellow portions of the design. Anything covered in wax at this point will preserve the yellow color. Here you can see that the wax has already preserved the white portion of the design. Don't worry about the dark color of the wax on the white portion of the design. It is only the wax that is dark. The wax will be removed later, taking that dark color with it. When filling in areas that are to be preserved in a particular color, be sure that the wax is flowing freely to ensure good coverage. Any portion not covered by wax will not be preserved, and hence the exposed portion of the egg will be colored by the next dye. One must dye the eggs in a particular order of color from lightest to darkest color. My intention is to use yellow, orange, green, red, and black. Green is a problem, however. Colors such as green, blue, and brown present a challenge as they do not always mix well with orange and red colored dyes. For this reason, these colors are often applied using a toothpick or similar applicator only to the area of the egg, which is to be dyed green or blue. Use a paper towel to pad dry the egg and then allow it to dry for 2 to 3 minutes. Preserve the green by covering it with wax in the same fashion as you did before. The egg is now placed into orange dye for 5 minutes. Remove the egg from the dye and pat it dry using a paper towel and then allow it to dry for 2 to 3 minutes. Now use the kistka to create the orange portions of the design. Anything covered in wax at this point will preserve the orange color. The egg is now placed into red dye for 2 to 3 minutes. Remove the egg from the red dye and pat it dry using a paper towel, allowing it to dry for 5 minutes. Use the kistka to create the red portions of the design. Anything covered in wax at this point will preserve the red color. The egg is now placed in black dye for 2 to 3 minutes. Remove the egg from the dye and pat it dry using a paper towel and then allow to dry for 5 minutes. Now we are ready to remove the wax. I will use the heat of a candle to gently melt away the wax. It is important to keep the egg near the side of the flame as opposed to above the flame so that the wax melts instead of burning. If the wax burns, it will smoke and subsequently stain your design. Be patient as you melt the wax. You don't want to spoil your pysanka by removing the wax in haste. Once the pysanka is complete, it may be sprayed with polyurethane or another clear coat to give it a shiny appearance. Some people drill a hole into the end of their pysanky and remove the contents using a syringe. I don't do that myself. A pysanka is a symbol of life, and I don't want to diminish that by removing any portion of the pysanka. Leaving the egg intact does come with risk, however. In warm, humid climates, the eggs are known to crack and ooze their contents. Fortunately, pysanky usually don't crack. If you're willing the risk, the contents of your pysanka will dry out in a few years and may last a very long time. Here's a pysanka my great-grandmother made. It is at least 70 years old and was passed on to me by my grand-aunt. The cool and relatively dry climate of Manitoba no doubt contributed to its preservation. Although the dyes have maintained their color, the varnish she used has yellowed over time. Here's a photo of my daughter Uliana at age 5, creating her first pysanka in the same family tradition as my mother taught me. This is my daughter Olesya with her finished product, created when she was 5 years old. I don't have a photo of my mother teaching me making pysanky, but in lieu of that, here's one of the two of us on her first canoe trip at age 83. Thanks, Mom. Дякую, мамо.